as mentioned earlier, you worked on some really high profile cases, some of which were featured on television. That's actually how I saw you and was like, I want to get this gentleman on my show. Forensic Files. I'm naming that. Love that show. And so I know that some of them are, back in the day. It was a while ago. I don't know if you remember some of those cases. So, do you remember like some of the cases that you've done? Like, for example, like the Caleb Farley one, or is it Fairley? Caleb Fairley?
Well, Caleb Fairley, that's a famous case. That
Yeah.
was a case of national significance because that was the first time that we used DNA evidence to get a murder conviction.
Okay.
So,
So for the people who are unfamiliar with that case, because obviously that was years ago, there's a new generation. Can you share some of the details of that case?
Sure. That the murder happened on September 10th, 1995. At the time, I was the number 2 guy in the DA's office in Montgomery County. Montgomery County is one of the suburbs of Philadelphia that has about 850,000 people. So there are 5 states that have fewer people than Montgomery County. So it's a big place. And I was the number 2 guy, which by default made me in charge of all homicide investigations in the county. It was a Sunday. The matter of fact, the Eagles were playing it in a rare 7:00 start. So it was something I was very interested in watching, big Eagles fan. So we got a call that a 19-month-old child was found dead by the side of the road in Valley Forge National Park. So that should give your audience some idea of where in the country we are located. Part of Valley Forge National Park, where George Washington wintered during the Revolution, is in Montgomery County. So that gives you some geographic context. But there's the child was quickly identified as Devin Mandrak. And the little girl's father had reported to the police that his wife and child had gone out shopping at a children's clothing store earlier in the day. He was, watching football, and I think I messed up. I think the Eagles had a day game that day. But anyway, so and they hadn't come back. He had packed little snacks for them, and the place was only a short distance away. So the police went to the children's clothing store and found the car, but no mother and no child, and no evidence of any foul play. So we began a murder investigation, and I had done enough murders by that point to know that when you find a child dead under such circumstances, it ordinarily is a parent got frustrated and accidentally killed the child and then panicked. So I told my wife that I'd be home in a couple of hours, and this looked like it wouldn't be any big deal. So this is Sunday night, the 10th. I got home about 4:00 in the morning on Wednesday. So that's another interesting story. But as it turns out, when we were conducting this investigation, there was a motorcycle gang rally for the motorcycle gangs that were in sort of the Northeast region. We had gotten the motorcycle gangs out of our county, but they were in a neighboring county, and they have to travel through our county to get there. And of significance, the woman who was missing was strikingly beautiful. I mean, beyond belief, the kind you would expect to see modeling clothes or in the movies, just astonishingly beautiful. And what we thought happened was this motorcycle rally would have the main route through the county would have taken them right by this children's clothing store. And we thought maybe she was kidnapped by the bikers, and the child was done away with, and then the woman was in the custody of the bikers, kidnapped.
Okay.
So we're running, we're chasing our tails at this point. Of course, we didn't know it at the time. Meanwhile, the children's clothing store had closed, and we wanted to see if she had actually gotten there. So we went to the owners and said, who was working there? Oh, my son was working there, but we closed at 6 o'clock or whatever the time was, and he went down the shore for a couple of days off. So we couldn't get a hold of the guy who was working there because we wanted to find out if the woman had driven her car there and went inside and then came back out and was
actually went into the store.
Right.
Yeah.
So it took us a while for him to show up. And when we got him, we asked him to come down to the police station, and it was evident that he was wearing makeup on his face, like a woman wears makeup to cover up a pimple or something. And after we had him wipe up his face, it was clear that he had marks that were consistent with scratches. Now, mind you, we still don't have the woman.
They were that visible? The scratches were
yes,
that visible?
Right. Remember, this is only the next day, so it's pretty
okay.
recent. At that point, I have a guy in custody that I don't have enough evidence to hold. He has a very good lawyer, probably at the time, and maybe even still the best lawyer we had in Montgomery County for criminal defense, a fellow named Mark Steinberg. And I've been up all night, and we're now into the next evening. And I didn't know what to do, because if he's the killer, then if I release him out into the public, he could kill again to avoid being arrested or whatever. So I called the district attorney, Mike Marino, and I asked him to come to the police department to make the decision on what to do about this. And while he was on his way there, I came up with this idea that we would agree, Pennsylvania's a death penalty state, we would agree not to seek the death penalty if the guy would tell us where the woman's body was. Because I knew that if we had the woman's body and these indeed were scratch marks, that there would be evidence of the scratching underneath her fingernails.
Yep.
So so the DA came, and we had all the police officers and detectives working on the case, and I explained the whole thing. And the DA asked everybody's opinion, and he put his hand in his face like this and goes, "Okay, go do it." So I went and I made that agreement that we wouldn't seek the death penalty. And of course, I couldn't use the fact that the guy knew where she was against him. So I was gambling that we would have forensics off of her body. We did not have any forensics that we were able to get off the child's body. So this was a big gamble for us.
This was a risk, yeah.
Yeah, because the concern is that she's burned up, she's in water, her body's in some condition eaten by animals, some condition where the forensics we needed would have been destroyed if they in fact existed. So he took the deal, and he showed us on do people even know what the yellow pages are anymore? I mean, he showed us on the yellow pages where there was a map indicating where a particular business was, and showed us on the map, she's right here. We went there, and there she was. She was without clothes in a sexually suggestive pose, which turned out being significant when we later found out the guy was a major league pervert. It fit into the psychological profile that the FBI had given us, which helped because we had to get a search warrant for the guy's blood and what ultimately turned out to be DNA. Well, by this point, by the time we got all this done, it's the middle of the night on Wednesday, or I guess Tuesday night into Wednesday, and I came home and went to bed. Since I woke up on Sunday morning, I hadn't been to bed, and now it's 4 a.m. on Wednesday, so I'm pretty tired.
Yeah.
So I wake up just before 12 o'clock, and my wife wants to know where I have been, and this is cell phones were a thing, but they were mounted in your car. You didn't carry them around with you.
Yeah.
So I said I was working, and she said, "No, you weren't at work, because I called and spoke to the DA, and he said that you weren't there." Well, the DA was speaking specifically, I wasn't there. I was out in the field working on the case, but
Yeah.
he didn't know why she was calling. So so she thought I was having an affair. So I said, well, turn on this. I heard the clock chiming, and it was 12 o'clock. I go, turn on the news. She says, what channel? Any channel.
Yeah.
So she turns on the news, and all the evidence, all the report about the case was on. So I said, that's what I was doing. So I dodged that bullet. So,
Yeah.
And we've been married 33 years. So now,
Oh my goodness.
Might stick. So, I mean, the case was a wild case, and because DNA was not a proven thing for use in court back then in Pennsylvania, the hearing, in order to ascertain whether we should be allowed to use the DNA we found under the fingernails, lasted a week, just that hearing alone. And it was admitted, and the Supreme Court upheld it. So of interest, the DNA work was done by Henry Lee, the famous forensic scientist. And this was all happening during OJ, and he had testified for OJ. So he had been he was head of the Connecticut State Police Laboratory, and the people of Connecticut were so incensed that he was testifying for OJ that his license to be allowed to do anything other than cases for Connecticut was revoked by the governor. So when I called and asked for him to do it, he said that the governor wouldn't allow him to do anything other than Connecticut cases. So I had to call the governor and get permission, the governor of Connecticut, to get permission to have him work on the case. Turns out that the chief of staff was a former prosecutor and talked the governor into it. So everything worked out as it should. But the last funny part about that was we didn't want people to know how desperate we were to prove that we were right in trading the death penalty for the body. So we didn't want the whole world to find out that we'd gone to see Henry Lee. So we went there in the very early morning hours and signed in with fake names. And they put us in a room, and I went to get a cup of coffee. And when I went by, coming back, I'm standing there with my cup of coffee in the hand, and Henry Lee is giving a national press conference on the OJ case with all these cameras and microphones and reporters. And he's the only one that can see me. All the reporters have their backs to me. And he says, I have to wrap this up because I need to see my, quote, excellent friend, the district attorney of Pennsylvania. And whereupon all the cameras spun around and focused on me. There I am standing with my coffee. And so much for being there secretly.
Inconspicuously, right? Yeah. Yeah. That was thrown out the door.